The Panthers might have their cups, and legacies have been solidified in South Florida. But now we ask the big question: whose numbers will go up in the rafters?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, June 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. You can find this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And great to be back here on the show, and thankful to have taken yesterday off because the lack of sleep that I had in the last 3 or 4 days since the Panthers have won the cup. Finally, I got to catch up on some sleep, and now we are back doing a podcast, sending you guys off into the weekend once again in a good mood once again. The Panthers are Stanley Cup champions, so why wouldn't we be in a good mood? And speaking of good mood, this will be a great time for me to introduce our guest here today on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Nich Fairbanks is back here, and Nich, welcome to your first appearance since the Panthers have won the Stanley Cup. And I have to ask you, how do you feel, my friend?
Feel about 10 pounds lighter, especially in the facial region. And I've been able to sleep a lot better than I have probably in most years, just knowing that finally, this is done. This is something that I've been waiting for, and I know a lot of other people have been waiting for a very long time, and they won it, in my opinion, in convincing fashion. So we can finally exhale, finally take a break, although I don't think the team's taking a break right now because
No.
Fort Lauderdale is going to be war zone afterwards. But, all good things are happening right now in Fort Lauderdale and South Florida.
Yeah, Fort Lauderdale is a party. The management is already in Vegas for the NHL awards and the draft tomorrow, which we'll get more into the draft later too. And yeah, you finally were able to sleep. I finally returned to my day job today, and living with my current residence being in Central Florida. I work with a lot of Lightning fans, and it was like that scene in The Wolf of Wall Street where Leonardo DiCaprio was like this. You can't really see my arms out, but you could just picture the GIF. And for me personally, if you're watching on the YouTube, you see me wearing my Everblade sweater. I was about to take 2 L's this week, which number one, if the Panthers lost, it would have been the bigger L. But the second one was a week before the announcement of the Everblades changing affiliates. The day that I went to interview Jake Maurice, I purchased this hoodie for it, and then I'm just like, damn, they're no longer affiliated, but I'm not going to return it because it's a really, really comfy hoodie. So glad I didn't take 2 L's this week for that. But hey, the dub for the Panthers and them getting to becoming a Stanley Cup champion. Oh, so worth it once again, and worth the wait and everything. But let's talk about a little bit of where the cup has been lately since the last time that we spoke to you guys. Roberto Luongo, he was eating pasta out of the Stanley Cup at his in-laws' Italian restaurant too. Let's not forget he met his wife here in his first stint with the Florida Panthers too, and deep connection here. So it's crazy to think how at one point we thought he was possibly going to leave for the GM position for the Montreal Canadiens, him being a Quebec native too. So great to see it come full circle for him. The guys went over to 11 in South Beach, and then Barkov wearing a Yari Curry jersey there, and then starting his own Barky chant. This is unlike him, and this is what happens when you win a cup and you just unleash. everybody has unleashed. Ryan Lomberg is taking a drink out of fans over the glass after they win. And everything. I mean, I've unleashed as far as like my memes on social media too. So that's another thing. Kachuk at Raising Cane's and the amount of fans that went to that Raising Cane's in Pompano Beach too. I still have not tried Raising Cane's, by the way. I still have to try it too. But the amount of people who showed up, and then what Kachuk was saying over calling everyone champs over the drive-through, I'm like, you understood the assignment, my friend. Congrats to you. Your thoughts, my friend?
I think the team and management and the whole organization definitely deserves to celebrate the way that they have. Seen some videos, seen some pictures of that 11 nightclub that they were at. I think things got a little crazy, but I think so far my favorite has been, I think they were singing a Queen song, and all of a sudden you see Carter Verhaeghe come by, and he says it like he says in the end, and that just it's his namesake basically because he's Mr. Clutch and he always is closing out games for the Panthers in the playoffs. But I'm glad they're having the time of their lives. They're really soaking it in. They're really kind of bringing everybody in South Florida together. Although, I think at the Elbow Room, there weren't too many fans like just outside. But I think now with the following, you can actually track where the Cup's going. They're getting more fans attracted to where they are. But looks like the Cup's in Vegas with Bob right now. So we have to see if there's going to be a charter flight tonight or a red eye to get back to South Florida, because I know Kachuk's probably, he's got his belt and everything. You have to wonder how he's feeling without the Cup right now.
Yeah, and this will be a good time for us to talk about a little bit of where else we would like to see the Cup. And these are the few things that if you're not on Instagram or Twitter, you probably are, you're probably hearing me say these things for the first time. But if you are, you're hearing me say this for the second time. So a few places that I'd like to see: Vicky's Bakery, Farm Stores, aka La Vaquita, the Infield, Zoo Miami, aka Miami Retro Zoo. That's what I grew up calling it. Domino Park, Flanagan's, Las Espadas Hoagies, Chico's in Hialeah, Havana Cuban Cafe in Palm Beach County, and Key West, the southernmost point of the continental USA. So I wanted to include the Tri-County area and obviously Key West to put a little bit of South Florida. This is South Florida's team after all. And obviously being from Dade, I'm most familiar with it and familiar with a good part of Broward. But if you are a Palm Beach County native listening to the show, comment below, please, on places that you'd like to see it, because I'm not as familiar with that too. But Nick, where else would you like to see the Cup pay a visit to?
So I think there's one place, and it's more of a selfish reason why I want it there. But the other place, and I'll name that a little bit later. But the first place I would like to see them go is actually the Marlins Park, and actually create what's called Panther Day at the park, and get fans out there not only to watch baseball and support the Marlins, but also just to have like that crowd there and have the Cup there and have it admired, and that stadium. And who knows, maybe that'll finally tip Gary Bettman to finally give the Panthers an outdoor game, just seeing how the Cup attracts so many fans. But the other place I would say is probably their old practice facility, the Ice Den.
Yep,
So many fans there that play and just show up and buy merchandise from there. It's just, I think through everything that Florida's been through over the last 30 years, I think that's one place that, if you were able to bring it to all the rinks over there, I think that would be phenomenal.
Yep. Yep. And selfishly, I would include my own home of Kendall Ice Arena. That's a place that I would like to see it. And also, airboat rides. People have talked about airboat rides. I've spoke about the midway point of Shark Valley, of that tower too, which that was an awesome bike ride if you ever get a chance to do it. And also on the way back, why not the Miccosukee Casino? Might as well pay a visit there. I mean, you just have to take Chrome all the way to and get to 75, and then you're back at the arena in maybe 30 minutes there too. So hey, who knows where the Stanley Cup is going to be, and we're going to be covering so many things this summer on where it's gonna be, and I'm gonna have I'm going to try to have eyes on it like a hawk. And even as a content creator, I will say it's really hard to keep up. I'm trying to like refresh every so often just to see what is new in relation to just this Stanley Cup win. But we are going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss more about now that the Panthers have their Stanley Cup, legacies have officially been stamped in the world of the Florida Panthers. But there are situations for the Panthers in future and in the past too that might be a yes, might be a no, and might be a maybe. And we're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether it's speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to this Friday, June 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Nick, we've had a little bit of a discussion off the record about retired jerseys and who's going to be up in the rafters. And we even if they lost the cup, even if they lost, still the greatest era in Florida Panthers history, although we would have had a little bit of a dark cloud going into the offseason. But let's talk about it. This conversation is going to start easy, and then it's going to get a little harder. Hall of Fame cases have already been solidified, in my opinion. Zero question for me. Barkov, Paul Maurice, Sergei Bobrovsky for them. By the way, Sergei Bobrovsky finished third in Vezina. Gustav Forsling finished ninth in Norris. But now let's talk about the retired numbers for the Panthers. And I'm gonna put these two together as the first one to talk about. Number 16 and number 5, Barkov and Ekblad. Two guys who stayed a good part of the rebuild for the Panthers. Number 3 overall pick and number 2 overall pick in 2013, number 1 in 2014. 7 head coaches between both of them together. Barkov specifically had 8 in 10 to 11 seasons. And just how Aaron Ekblad changed his game from more being offensively minded to defensive minded. Barkov not having an explosion on offense until a little bit later in his career, basically after Yager came around too. So for those two, it's a yes for me. Agree or disagree?
I agree. Very much so.
All right, next one. 72, Sergei Bobrovsky. 2 Vezinas right before coming to the Florida Panthers. He stopped 5 100-point players in Kucherov, Pasta, Panarin, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. He was the Conn Smythe favorite going into the Stanley Cup final last year. Even at points, we laid a little bit of a late bloomer as far as our opinion on him being the Conn Smythe going into the final this year. But hey, just like how we said with the FedEx Cup playoffs in golf, the later you go into rounds, the more those games mean. So, and he's the 6th goaltender with multiple Vezinas and a Stanley Cup with Ed Belfour, Martin Brodeur, Dominic Hasek, Patrick Waugh, and Tim Thomas. So I think it's a yes. 72 will be in the rafters. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, of course. He's the only Panther goalie to actually win one. Van Beesbrook was there, and the only other one was Bob. So he actually won one, and he deserves it 100%.
Yep, and up there with and even though he's not going to get the games played and wins for the Florida Panthers, just what he's done in his short time here, definitely very impactful. It's going to get a little harder now. Number 19, Matthew Tkachuk, and I think we could basically pair him and maybe Gustav Forsling in this same conversation. Matthew Tkachuk, second year with the team. Yes, changed the identity of the Panthers. I'm going to say not yet, but on his way. Same thing with Gustav Forsling. Drafted in the 4th round, 4 different teams for him. Put on waivers twice for Chicago, Carolina. Panthers pick him up, turn into a number 1 defenseman, give him an 8-year deal. Matthew Tkachuk, the identity player, signed an 8-year deal. His won't expire until 2030. Gustav's until 2032, but his the clauses in his contract do change in the same year that Barkov and Tkachuk's go around. So you kind of see the championship window there. And just now the underrated title in the NHL goes to him for me. So I'm going to pair those two together, and feel free to disagree with this. So for me, Tkachuk and Forsling, not yet, but on their way.
So I'll say not yet, but for different reasons. Tkachuk has totally changed South Florida sports, in my opinion, and also, the Florida Panthers outlook. The fact that he accepted a trade, he signed the extension, and this team was different from his first day of practice to the games that he's played and just what he was able to do in the playoffs last year. He will eventually be, I think, honestly, right now, I think he's a shoo-in. It's just he'll have to get a couple more seasons under his belt to, I guess, in a way, like, enshrine himself into it. Gustav Forsling, to me, I think he needs to play a long time here, and I also think he needs to continue to be that number 1 guy that Florida's kind of developed him into. Yeah. You don't see anybody else's jersey up there. I mean, you don't see Jovo's jersey up there, who, he had 2 stints with the Panthers and everything, but you have these guys who are fan favorites and everything, but not necessarily going up. We only have Luongo up there right now. So I think it would be fitting if he were to have a nice long career with Florida. Yes, he will.
Yep. So, yeah, the Cup definitely adds that resume, and then what happens after, and then how Forsling's game is for the long haul too, and just when it comes to defense, that translates to years. Maybe points will for guys who are more offensive defensemen that will go down, but for Forsling, that's the number 1 thing that you're relying for him on. And who knows what happens with him? He's eventually going to be the guy on the power play to quarterback the power play. That's what I believe is going to happen, with likely Brandon Montour going to walk, because everything that's out there is saying that he's going to get the bag this offseason. So these next 2, and this actually comes with a little bit of a report that's been floating around lately. Number 23, Carter Verhaeghe. There's rumors, and this is from David Pagnotta of the 4th Period, and also our friend David Dwork, friend of the program, that says that rumors are that there is a possible 6-year extension worth 8 to 8.5 for Carter Verhaeghe, and he's eligible to sign it on July 1st. For him, Mr. Clutch, 40-goal scorer for him, has had the biggest moments in Florida Panthers history, and we could argue that if it wasn't for that Boston Game 7, the Panthers wouldn't even be here in this position because of the confidence, the trades that they do in the offseason too. And think about what happened the last contract that he had. After signing a 2-year, $2 million contract, Bill Zito got him an extension a year before his next deal too. So that 4.16 that he was getting, outplaying that contract too.
Yep.
So with Verhaeghe, if that report is true, and that's where you have the little bit of an asterisk there. If he does eventually sign, 23 is a yes. Agree or disagree?
100% agree. If it wasn't for Bill Zito bringing him in and taking him from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida doesn't make it out of the first round against Washington. Let's be real here. He had all those goals. He scored the game winner. Secondly, yes, you have that Boston series, which to me is his biggest goal, of his career here in Florida. And then again, just every time he scores, he just seems like he gives the team confidence and just a boost. Like, hey, we can do this. I had the 3 points going on into Game 6 and now into Game 7 that Panthers had to score first. Verhaeghe had to be one of those goal scorers, and then Bob has to return. And it just shows you that he's in that upper echelon of how important he is to this team. So a resounding hell yeah to Carter Verhaeghe.
For Mr. Clutch. And then this next one, and this one's this one I just don't have a pulse on yet because July 1st is very soon. Number 13, Sam Reinhart. And it's all going to depend if he signs. And the thing is, if you re-sign Reinhart, the thing is two-way play that just, and yes, he might not get 57 goals again. But if he goes back to the mean, you're looking at 35, somewhere to 35 to 40 goals on that side. Plus, he plays both sides of the ice. And yeah, I know you want to cash in after you win, but I think for Reinhart, all the losing that he's experienced too in the beginning of his career, to find some sustainability, if you get paid, cool. I know you want to put some financial stability, but is it going to come at are you going to be okay with if it's a team that is trying to fix their holes with free agency? Because sometimes teams will try that route and it doesn't work. So for Reinhart, what is familiar with him? And also for all these moves that the Panthers could make if they sign Verhaeghe and Reinhart, that could also mean Aaron Ekblad could be moved because his no move clause does become modified no trade. That's also something out there too, that the Panthers could possibly move Aaron Ekblad after July 1 because he'll have to submit a 12-team no trade list. So if he signs, then yes.
I think so. And I kind of pair him with my favorite player, Pavel Bure. Pavel has the most goals in Panthers history in a season.
In 2
and
seasons.
in 2 seasons, but I'm not adding playoffs obviously into that because they only made it 1 year with him. But I think if Reinhart chooses to stay and takes a hometown discount for Florida, and it's an 8-year deal, yeah, I think his number is eventually because, listen, I don't think we win the Stanley Cup without him. He finally showed up in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, I know he scored the first goal of the series, and he ended up scoring the last goal of the series. And with the season that he had and everything, and how much trust the team had in him, and how much trust Paul Maurice had in him, and just was able to develop him and bring him out, I think that he would be a beloved Panther, and his jersey would definitely be up there.
Yeah, and the amount of players who get uniforms retired because of winning a cup and the impact. I mean, I know Chicago won 3 in a 6-year span, but then you see the amount of numbers that they had because of it. I'm like looking at all and what those players mean to a fan base and the connection that they have. I mean, and obviously impact on the ice. That's why those 7 players, those numbers, those are the ones that are the big discussion for who could possibly one day become in the Rafters. So that is our conversation based on that. And obviously the last few can definitely change depending on what happens in the next few days for free agency and the draft. And speaking of the draft, wait, what? There's a draft tonight? Yeah. Such a big turnaround. So we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're not necessarily going to break down the draft, but take a look at the Panthers position and how great it feels to be here for the Panthers now, as they have 5 picks in this year's draft. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, and I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs finished, we got fewer games, and sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. And all we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime we are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. segment number 3 here on this Friday, June 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And Nick, the draft is tonight, round 1 of the draft in Vegas, the last centralized draft before it becomes decentralized. And what crazy to think, we all know who's going number 1 overall, Matt Glenn Celebrini out of Boston University. And then there's defensemen like Z William, who was Jack Devine's teammate in college, Artur Leshinov. Those are other prospects to look out for in the draft this year. But not going to pretend that I know everything about draft prospects for the Florida Panthers. Obviously, our focus has been on the run. But I also laugh because this is the position that you want to be. Every champion gets here, and what you use as far as your assets to create a winner too, and also how you develop too. Because then first, I'm gonna first list off some of the picks that the Panthers do have and they don't. No first round pick. The Claude Drew trade for Owen Tippett. No second round pick. That's the Anton Stroman trade to Arizona, now Utah, for a 2024 second, and they got back a 2023 third, which they used last year. They have the 97th overall pick, 129. They don't have a fifth, their own fifth round pick. That was the Kyle Okposo trade, but they do have Philly's fifth from that Claude Drew trade. So 141st, 193rd, their own. And then the last pick in the draft, 225th, which they have two Mr. Irrelevance in their organization, Patrick Hornquist and Paul Maurice in their organizations. But I think of more of looking forward to hearing all the GMs say congratulations to the Florida Panthers for winning the Stanley Cup. But I also think about this, Nick, just the fact that the Panthers were still able to get to this position of winning the Stanley Cup, while 2 years ago they traded 2 first rounders for rentals in Sherratt and Giroux. And this is the draft that they won the cup in. And this wasn't and they were trying to go all in 2 years ago. So it's crazy to think how they recovered. So how impressive is that, first of all?
Well, it shows that the management department knows what they're doing. You know, they felt like they had assets to give up to get those players that they thought would push them over the top, in Giroux and I'll say to a lesser extent Sherratt. But, they learned on the fly. They gave up those first round picks. They only got to the second round, and we all know what happened there. Following year, you had to change your dressing room, so they made the huge trade that they did for Matthew Tkachuk.
And another
and And you know what? They might as well just be like jelly beans. Just, everybody gets a first from the Panthers. But
Birdie Bot's every flavor beans from Harry Potter.
Ugh. But I will say this, like the fact that they were able to learn and that they were able to do their scouting on players that were already in the organization that they could fill outside just shows that it can be done, but you have to be smart about it. You are going to overpay on free agency, but it doesn't mean you have to go over the premier players. Like, for example, let's just say Saros is going to be a free agent after this season. How much was he going to get in free agency? And what if Florida couldn't, take on Bob anymore? How much were they going to throw at him, for example? So the fact that you have the management team being able to actively scout and understand the type of team that they have and what will help them makes it a little bit more it's a little bit easier to stomach when you see what kind of draft picks they have. And you know what? To me, it makes their drafting easier now because guess what? You just pick best player available, and if they don't work out, guess what? They probably have a plan to move them in a different, for a different player, a different cause.
And then you consider the fact that, Forsling's the obvious one, but then you have guys with high upside in Jonah Gadjevich, who's been a 100-point player in the in junior hockey too. So, and he got an extension last year, even though he didn't play in the playoffs. So those are the replacements that you're going to get. Uvis Balinskis, who had a great start to the season, developed in Charlotte. So those are the guys that you're going to have to rely on for the Panthers too. And also what they've done in different trades too. I mean, upping a stock of Devin Levi in the 7th round, which Roberto Luongo has a big influence on that pick, first of all, too.
Yep.
So think about the two biggest trades in Florida Panthers history, Matthew Tkachuk, getting Matthew Tkachuk and Roberto Luongo, which you also got Olli Jokinen in that one, too, for Mark Parrish, too. So two great trades and all paid off, even though it was years later, and as far as Luongo, but using that one to trade for Sam Reinhart, even though Yuri Kulich is a pretty good prospect for the Buffalo Sabres, who they got there. He was the captain of the Finnish team for the World Juniors too. So that one, and also Mackenzie Weegar, a 7th round pick, 6 picks away from the very last pick too. You up his stock, create him as a number 1 defenseman, or and a guy right-handed shot, defensive defenseman for him too, and you were able to not give up as much that you probably would have for someone like Matthew Tkachuk. And also something you like to say when it came to the Sam Bennett trade, give him another 2 second-round picks for Sam Bennett. And also Montour. I never thought that Montour was going to up his stock this much for free agency when they traded a 3rd-round pick for him back in the 2021 trade deadline. It's crazy to think also the 2021 trade deadline, people were so down on both Bennett and Montour, and then how much they how much they fit into not only the Panthers then, but also a coaching change too. So also very impressive for those two to just be so determined in their game.
I think what Florida does is that they allow the player to be themselves, and they allow them to, I guess, mature and really fall into this team landscape that they've built. Marie says it all the time that they definitely love each other, and it really does show that every single player cares about one another. You can't say that about every team. You can't say that about every locker room. So the fact that Florida has been so welcoming, it's been a breath of fresh air. Like, we are now like the epitome of what a team should look like, not only on the ice, but even off of it. Save the elbow room and probably Club 11. But I will say it's amazing to see what this franchise has turned into over the last 5 years, and that it's not being led by draft picks per se. I mean, you have Barkov, you have Ekblad and everything, but most of the talent that's on this team was either traded for, or picked up on waivers, or they were a free agent. So Florida knows what they're doing. And again, if you're a draft pick and you put your work in, you'll make it. If not, they'll probably find you somewhere else. Kind of like Gregory Denisenko, unfortunately.
Yeah, who they got for nothing. And so that's the hard part about that one. And I did not even mention earlier about trying to get younger with from going from Jonathan Huberdeau's contract to Matthew Tkachuk, 5 years difference between them, and also the different style of play for them for the Panthers too, and just ability to identify talent over and over again. There's just one other defenseman from that they got, Hovorka, who that is another conversation that is one of talking about probably the next Uvis Balinskis maybe of what they can do with their picks too. So also a few conditions that were changed based on the Panthers winning the Cup. Instead of the Panthers giving a 7th round pick to the Buffalo Sabres, of this year's draft, it'll actually be this year's 5th too. So, and also Vladimir Tarasenko, because they won the Cup, instead of it being a 2024 4th, it's actually a 2026 3rd. So the Ottawa Senators, they'll have to wait a little bit, but that draft pick will be higher for them. So the little bit of spreading around too for Bill Zito and trying to strategize of, okay, you still want to have some picks in volume, but you still want to be strategic with how you get. I mean, going back to this Strawman trade as a cap clearing trade. Strawman was the number 1 defenseman at the end of the 2021 postseason, because let's not forget Aaron Ekblad didn't play there. When he fractured his leg in Dallas in that shortened season, it was him and Weegar as the top pair. And honestly, I thought that Strawman and Weegar held their own for what they had too.
Yep.
Basically, it was goaltending that was the issue. You use 3 goaltenders in one series, you're gonna get burned there. And Jonathan Huberdeau was the least of the Panthers' problems at least in that year. But the Bills do. at this point. But now, what's the work that's going to be done? Spencer Knight had a good season in HL Charlotte. Mackie Semiskevich too. He's a 20 goal scorer too. So those are the guys that you're going to be looking to. And even in the draft, you mostly do one thing every year. And even if you have a goalie, you still draft one because you still want to get guys into the system, and you never know where you're going to find one because their franchise goalie, Sergei Bobrovsky, was undrafted.
Perfect. No, I couldn't have said it better myself on that. Like I said, you always try to draft best player available or what your team need is. Florida's never been a huge developer of talent, unfortunately. However, I think now that they have this window now where they can win multiple cups, and that'll be a conversation for another show, but it allows them to draft people and take the time to actually not pressure them to come up and throw them to the dogs. They can learn the game the right way and learn what it is to be an NHLer or building up to be an NHLer. So all positive things from winning the cup.
You know what that's called? Culture.
Mm.
The Panthers sure have a culture, and it's great to see. But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they could follow you online, my friend.
Thank you again, Armando, for having me on. Everybody, you guys can follow me on X or Twitter at Prudential0. And I look forward to seeing what we have to talk about next week because it's going to get tasty.
Definitely exciting. And sending you guys off on the weekend, I want to tell you guys all, have fun at the parade, everybody. Hope you all have the time of your life. And Nick, for you, I will see you next week, my friend.
I'll see you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steer Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.